we're going to jump straight into this one, Inventing America for Europe by Theodore De Brey. It's an article by Dr. Lauren Kilroy Eubank. It's quite possible I actually got this article from one of the content creators that I'm already sub to, quite possibly Audacious One, A1, Ahanu L, who has been fantastic. I mean, the information that he gives out, you could actually be there for the next few months just watching his videos alone. So whether I got this from him, I'm not quite sure. If I did, thank you very much, Ahanu. Also, I forgot to mention ICCC, who are the UK contingent, who I did mention the UK contingent, but I didn't actually mention their names. Another good, fantastic channel to sub to, because again, they deal with a lot of different subject matters. We're just going to delve into this from the point of view of looking at the fact that a lot of these writers didn't actually visit none of the countries that they're writing about. And as I mentioned, we had Frederick Remington, who was there in his New York flat, creating paintings, artwork for the American Civil Wars, and the depictions that he was creating were basically made up in his head. And you'll see here, same thing here. So let's just build us up a picture. In the center of this image, we see a finely dressed Christopher Columbus with two soldiers. Columbus stands confidently, his left foot forward, with his pike planted firmly in the ground, signaling his claim over the land. Behind him to the left, three Spaniards rise across in the landscape, symbolizing a declaration of the land for both the Spanish monarchs and for the Christian God. Here we have the picture. Theodore De Brey, Christopher Columbus arrived in America in 1594, engraving from 8.6C19. Alright, that's aside, I'm not interested in that. From the travels in the East Indies and West Indies. That is where the picture comes from. Here we go. Unclothed Taínos, the indigenous people of Hispaniola, which it wasn't even called that then, walk around Columbus bringing gifts of necklaces and other precious objects. Further in the background on the right side of the picture, other Taínos with armed raised and twisted bodies flee in fear from the Spanish ships anchored offshore. The print from 1592 by the engraver Theodore De Brey presents Columbus and his men as the harbingers of European civilization and faith, and juxtapose them with Taínos who are presented as uncivilized, unclothed, and pagan. This print, along with hundreds of others De Brey made for his 27-volume series, published over more than 40 years, collected travels in the East Indies and West Indies 1590 to 1634, affirm and assert a sense of European superiority, as well as invent for Europeans what America, both its land and its peoples, was like. Though De Brey is most famous for his engravings of European voyages to the Americas and Africa and Asia, he never actually travelled across the Atlantic. It's not surprising, then, that De Brey's depiction of the indigenous peoples of the Americas was a combination of the work of other artists who had accompanied Europeans to the Americas, artists who often brought on journeys in order to document the lands and peoples of the Americas for a European audience, as well as his own artistic inventions. So here we can see, this is why I'm always saying that there are levels to the information that we read, and I'm not saying I'm always perfectly right, because what you tend to find is, unless those people have actually physically been there and those artists were actually physically there, quite likely the depictions that you're seeing either has come out of their imagination, the creator's imagination, or has been staged. It's a prop, and would be something that we would consider to be something like the human zoos. So, okay, so I'm gonna, I lost, for instance, uh, he adopted without credit some of the images created by Johannes Stradanus, a well-known illustrator who created early images of the Americas. In his collected travels in the East Indies and West Indies, De Brey published and translated into multiple languages the accounts of others who had spent time travelling around the globe, and created more than 600 engravings to illustrate the volumes. The engravings above of Columbus and the Taínos came from volume 4 of the collected travels in the East Indies and West Indies. This volume reprinted the accounts of the Milanese traveller Girolamo Benzoni, who himself had drawn on the accounts of Columbus in his own writings. And this actually isn't dissimilar to when you look at the timeline and you see Scaliger. Scaliger kind of made up the timeline, and other people then, without inspecting his work, just automatically assumed that he was right and continued to add to the lie, basically. And that's what we get in here. So somebody has actually been out there and travelled, and this man has then taken his work and done what he wants with it, basically. Right, documenting America. So, De Brey's copper plate engravings were among the first images that Europeans encountered about the peoples, places, and things of the Americas, even if he began making them almost a century after Columbus's initial voyage. In the engraving, with Columbus on the shoreline, the barely clothed Taínos resemble Greco-Roman sculptures, especially though their poses and musculature. De Brey apparently had no interest in documenting the actual appearance of the Taínos. Here we have two depictions. You see the similarities there, how they're posed to this pose here. I mean, who stands like that when they're holding stuff in their hands? Come on. And which is what I find quite interesting with some of the supposed sort of truth tellers that you see on YouTube, who will tell you that, oh, there's something wrong with the timeline, and all of the books out of the sort of 1800s are very, very dodgy and need to be inspected, and then spend the rest of their time bringing you what? Books out of the 1800s. Does it make sense? Please, make it make sense. So, De Brey's collected travels belong to the genre of travel literature which had been popular since the Middle Ages. Accounts of the Americas became widely popular after Columbus's first voyage. For example, Columbus's 1493 letter to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel, who had helped finance the voyage, was published in 17 editions by 1497, and often included woodcuts depicting select moments of the voyage. De Brey was a Protestant and fled League, today Belgium, where he was born to avoid persecution. He made his way to Frankfurt, where he started work on grand voyages, plagiarizing basically. After his death in 1598, his family continued his work and finished the remaining volumes. Had they been at all? In 1634. Interestingly, different versions of the grand voyages catered to different Christian confessional groups. The volumes in German were gathered towards Protestants, while those in Latin appealed to Catholics. De Brey created images that he could market to either audience, but he made changes to the text to appeal more to either Catholics or Protestants. psalms that Calvinists felt encapsulated their beliefs, or longer passages criticizing Catholic belief or colonial practices were omitted from Latin versions, which were often filled in with more engravings depicted from other parts of the text. General subjects, the grand voyages. So, okay, I think this is where we get down to the bits. Here we hear about their customs, about the fact that they were cannibals, because I do have a video coming out talking about the fact that the Europeans depicting Americas as cannibals had more to do with their psyche, their folklore, and what was going on with them as opposed to what was really going on over here. So here we have, looks like, I call them the puffy trouser guys. This must be the conquistadors here getting killed. While some of De Brey's prints in Grand Voyages focus on the exploits of famed European navigators like Columbus, others show indigenous groups and their customs. Some of these images display the atrocities that occurred in the wake of European arrival, violent conquest and colonization. Indigenous peoples are fed to dogs, hanged or butchered. Still others depict native response to the European invasion, such as drowning Spaniards in the ocean or pouring liquid gold into the invaders' mouths. Virginia, the Grand Voyages, the section on cross-Atlantic voyages, begin with a reprint of an earlier text by the English colonist Thomas Harriot, a brief and true report of the Newfound Land of Virginia, 1590. It also includes translations of this text into Latin, German, and French. De Brey's accompanying engravings were based on watercolors by John White, who had settled on Roanoke Island, North Carolina in 1585, and who had created paintings while there. His watercolors document clothing, dwellings, and rituals of the eastern Algonquin peoples. Even though Virginia and North Carolina were colonized by Europeans after they had seized other areas in the Americas, De Brey placed them in the first volume of his Grand Voyages. This may be because he had visited London just after Harriot's book was published in 1588 and was given both that text and the watercolors of White. De Brey was clearly not interested in providing a chronological account of European exploration and colonization. One of White's paintings represents the town of Saconton, with people going about their daily life activities. In the right foreground, people dancing in a circle, cornrows in neat rows, dwellings lined in a road. In his engraving, De Brey made several changes to White's watercolor. He expanded the village and removed the textual inscriptions that identified important features of the village, instead incorporating a separate key. So that looks like that's possibly the original. There we go. So yeah, that's his. So there's dancing. There are houses in a row. There's the houses. I suppose where's the pool? Because this was where they stored the pool. Let's see what he did. So this is what, and it's the town of Sakota. Now this is another thing I'm going to point out here, that when you try and read when you do actually try and read these 16th century books, the English is absolutely atrocious. It's nothing like the English that we see nowadays. So often you will, I mean, look at this here. Town, 2 V's to make the W, with an E on the end. That's just one. S's, as in sugar, look like F's, as in fire. Your pants are on fire, that type of fire. As well as quite a few other letters and spellings of words that make it hard going to read books. So you can see here, town of Sakota, whereas it's supposed to be Sekoton, and it's not even in the same area. He is saying that the English have actually got this village in a place where Indians were clearly still living and the English hadn't even colonised it yet. For his engravings, De Brey also transformed watercolours White had created of Scottish pics, an ancient pagan indigenous peoples of Scotland who lived in a loose confederation of groups and who painted their bodies. But why include a discussion of pics in a book on the Americas? There we go, look at this. Now, didn't we just look at 2 V's and say that was supposed to be a W? So, this is supposed to say a true picture of a young daughter of the Pits. Please look at this. I wonder if I can... I'm going to make this bigger so you can actually see how the writing was. So, let's see what it says about this particular picture here. Theodore De Brey, a young daughter of the Pics, 1590, engraving after a watercolour by Jacques de Moyne. It's an unfortunate name, originally attributed to John White, for collected travels in the East Indies and West Indies, which reprints Thomas Harriot, a brief and true report of the newfound land of Virginia, of the commodities, and of the nature and manners of the natural inhabitants. That's at the British Library. Harriot text states that some picture of the Picts which in old times did inhabit one part of Great Britain, which according to him showed that the inhabitants of the Great Britain have been in times past as savage as those of Virginia. White compares them to the Algonquin peoples to suggest that Europe has its own history of uncivilized pagan people. Despite attempting to reconcile the Algonquin people with the Picts in Europe, the manner in which he compares them as savages speaks to a presumed European superiority. Here we have here. I've seen some of these pictures because I had a German book that I was looking through, which I think I copied a lot of pictures because it was impossible to read, and I did actually start calling some, so you can't see them here, but I called them the puffy trouser guys because they mostly seem to wear puffy trousers. But here we go. Theodore De Brey. Indians worshipped a column in honor of the French king, 1591. Engraving for Collection Peregrinationum in Indiam Accidentalam. So they were calling America India then, were they? Brevis Nariato Erior Coe en Florida, America, Provincia Gallis, Acidorant, Frankfurt, Maine. So we've seen here the 2 interpretations of the German and then French. Is that French? Ew. Looks a bit Latin-y there. Travels to Florida. Volume 2. Published in 1591, focused on French voyages to Florida and was based on the accounts of the French colonist René Guélain du Laudonnière. De Brey created engravings based on the watercolours of Jacques de Morges, who was part of the French expeditions to Florida that were headed by Jean Ribault in 1562 and Laudonnière in 1564. One of the engravings adapted from Lemoyne's watercolours show the Timucua worshipping a column that had been supposedly erected by Ribault. The most prominent figure, identified as Chief Hathor, stands next to Laudonnière, who has followed him to see the site. The other Timucua kneel while raising their arms in gestures of reverence in the direction of the column, itself decorated with garlands. Before it, offerings of foods and vegetables abound. De Brey made several notable changes to the print, such as adjusting Hathor's features to look more European, with raised cheekbones and an aquiline nose. Lemoyne's earlier watercolour had also Europeanized the Timucua people. He paints them with the same complexion as Laudonnière, but even with blonde hair. So this is his picture, and here we see, oh my word, this is Jacques de Morges Laudonnière. This is his picture, and that's at the New York Library. Oh, it's a bit small. Oh my days, look, they're so white you can't even see them. Phew, word, okay. Cannibalism in Brazil. Here we have a picture. You'll also see it amongst the other pictures in the German books, the pictures that I've taken out there. So, Theodore De Brey engraving depicting cannibalism in Brazil for volume 3 of collected travels in the East Indies and West Indies, which reprinted Hans Stadler's account of his experiences in Brazil, 1594, British Library. Cannibalism was and remains commonly associated with certain indigenous peoples of the Americas. In De Brey's series, his third volume recounted Hans Stadler's experiences of cannibalism in Brazil. De Brey's engravings for this volume were among the most well known in the late 16th and early 17th century, in large part because of their gruesome and sensationalistic character. Note that De Brey's print, Indians pour liquid gold into the mouth of a Spaniard, may also depict cannibalism among the figures shown in the background. We will actually get the opportunity to see this picture, because I have one slowly. Stadler, a German soldier who travelled to South America, had been captured in 1553 by the Tupinamba, an indigenous group in Brazil. After his return to Europe in 1557, he wrote about Tupinamba customs, family life, and cannibalism, describing how the Tupinamba practiced it ceremonially, especially eating their enemies. It's loaded. Oh, that's a bit of a mean picture. You can't even scroll up. I've got a larger picture that you'll be able to see in the picture show at the side. Staddon's initial book included simple woodcuts, but De Brey's updated engravings proved far more popular and enduring in the European cultural imagination. Perceptions of indigenous Brazilians were shaped by these images and reinforced the notion that the Tupinamba and others like them were depraved, primitive, and sinful. One of his images depicts naked adults and children drinking a broth made from a human head and intestines, visible on plates amidst the gathering people. Another depiction of Tupinamba shows a fire below a grill, upon which body parts are roasted. Figures surround the grill, eating. In the back is a bearded figure, most likely intended to be Staddon. Hand-coloured versions of De Brey's prints emphasise the disturbing subject of the images even more. Cannibalism would come to be closely associated with the peoples of Americas. De Brey would even use images of cannibals to serve as the engraved frontispiece to Volume 3, showing the Tupinamba eating human flesh, exorcised them, and justified. Cannibalism would come to be closely associated with the people of Americas. De Brey would even use images of cannibals to serve as the engraved frontispiece of Volume 3, showing the Tupinamba eating human flesh, exorcised them, and justified European control. Other volumes and legacy of De Brey. The 4th, 5th, and 6th volumes of the set focus of Girolamo Benzoni's accounts, such as Historia Mondo Nuova, with Part 6 discussing the atrocities committed against the indigenous population of Peru. Part 7 to 12 incorporated the travel accounts of Ulricus Faber, Sir Francis Drake, and Walter Raleigh, Jose de Costa, Amerigo Vespucci, John Smith, and Antonio de Hera, among others. Like the volumes that came before them, De Brey provided numerous images to increase readers' understanding of the narratives. The grand voyages and the entire collective's travels relate more generally to the forms of knowledge and collecting popular at the time. Like a cabinet of curiosity, De Brey's project organized information in text and images so that readers could come to know the Americas. The volumes seek to provide encyclopedic knowledge about the Americas, such as the objects did in a curiosity cabinet. De Brey's many prints were important resources for Europeans who sought to better understand the Americas. It allowed readers to take possession of these distant lands and peoples, where they could become participants in the colonial projects that then underway, allowing them to feel a sense of dominance over the peoples and lands across the Atlantic, lands which many in Europe would never see firsthand. These first inaccurate images and narratives supported a sense of superiority, with Europeans positioned as more civilized and advanced, and the American others as less so. De Brey's images of America would cement for Europeans a vision of what America was like for centuries to come. Some pictures of the pics which in the old time did habit one part of Great Britain, which according to him show that the inhabitants of the Great Britain have been in times past as savage as those of Virginia. And you can see what they've done is they've actually sort of written it as taken out of the book. And you can see that the U is a V, you've got two U's, to represent a V here. So English was not the easiest of languages to read at the time. So look at these early images here, see if they're saying anything decent. Okay, well, we have an overview here. In 1493, Columbus wrote a letter about his discoveries that was translated and published across Europe. That report opened a period in which the New World became a subject of great interest to Europeans, especially fascinating for the native peoples. The name Indians derived from Columbus's belief that the islands he found were in the Indian Ocean and were used in England as early as 1553. Well, we know that to be a bit of a lie, but let's continue. Europeans learned about the Virginian Indians through both words and pictures. Yet, as important as the writings of explorers and colonists were, the most powerful impressions came from prints. The coastal areas around Chesapeake Bay were visited by a number of European explorers in the 1500s. No images of the natives were produced, however, until the English became interested in colonization in the 1580s. In January 1585, Queen Elizabeth consented to Sir Walter Raleigh's request that the land along the North American coast be named in her honour as Virginia. The William W. Cole collection contains many of the engravings of Virginia produced from 1590 to the 1800s that influenced European opinions of and thus policies towards the natives. And I'm assuming that this is the picture here. Sketched from life, John White's paintings. A 1585 expedition to Virginia under Walter Raleigh's sponsorship failed to establish a lasting colony, for the would-be settlers abandoned Roanoke Island, today in North Carolina, and returned to England with Francis Drake in 1586. A second attempt in 1587 became the Lost Colony. The 1585-86 venture did leave a valuable record, however, thanks to the scholar Thomas Harriot and an artist John White. Harriot published a brief and true report of the new found land of Virginia in 1588. A group of John White's paintings are preserved at the British Museum. Although his images depict natives from what is now North Carolina, Virginia can claim them too because White and the English knew that area as Virginia, and the Indians were southern Algonquin and coastal dwellers, as were the natives of Tideport, Virginia. Though White's work remained virtually unseen until the mid-20th century, in the last 30 years the paintings have been widely reproduced. Much about their original creation remains uncertain. White probably made sketches and visual notes in the field and used these studies to paint a finished set of watercolours. From this master set of paintings, White then made further copies for various purposes. Only the set at the British Museum is extant, and whether these paintings are from his master set or from a copied set is unknown. It's so tiny. Alright, so we're looking at an index here. Some of those pictures. These are De Brey's. De Brey is really suspect. I mean, just looking here, saying that a lot of his things were just, see, they're all De Brey. Quite interesting. The old barbecue there. You see, at least in whites, watercolors, they do have some colour. People. It's very small though, that's the only thing. Oh, they're idle kibasa. Okay, so this is the idle kibasa. Well, they're calling it an idol, aren't they? Interesting. Fine, so let's take a look at some of these John White pictures and see what they look like. Actually, interesting. I lost the page that I was on, but I came over to here, and it's got a coat of arms. I don't even think it's worth looking at. Hand-coloured coat of arms from the dedication page of the book. Note, these engravings do not accurately reflect the inhabitants of North Carolina in the late 16th century, nor are they accurate reproductions of John White's drawings. Interesting. And it says here, same thing. Indians, America, fish, fire, cookery. Two Native American men are shown cooking large fish on a wooden grate over an open fire. Note, these De Brey engravings do not accurately reflect the inhabitants of North Carolina in the late 16th century, nor are they accurate reproductions of, and it would be John White, because this guy was straight plagiarizing, basically. Alright, let's see if we can find a bigger picture then of John White's stuff. Alright, so this is John White's painting of Indian woman and young girl. Watercolor drawing Indian woman and young girl by John White, created 1585, 1586. This is at the British Museum. Now, and here we have the De Brey's version. So you can see that I don't know what's up with De Brey making his children look like just give adult bodies. Maybe he wasn't able or capable of drawing childlike bodies, because at least it's just with the other one, it's just the face of the child that looks quite adult. But that musculature that you're seeing on the children of De Brey, they just don't have that in this particular, so at least this man had a better sense of body form. It's actually more or less given the child the same face as the mother, which is quite interesting. And again, John White is showing the Indian woman of Secaton. see there. Now here we have a charnel house. Now interestingly enough, when I do my video on the England begging for help, that's how he starts off. And I wondered if I was pronouncing it correctly. But it looks like they're smoking people here. They're barbecuing. Oh, what's going on? But there's the fire. The fire's outside, not underneath. So what's going on here? What's a charnel house? There's a guy in a suit. What's going on there? A suit and a hat. Alright. And here we're looking at the two comparisons. Now, okay, not a great deal of difference except that this seems to be like a standalone building and he's actually put another encasing around it. So, is it because he didn't understand what he was looking at? What he was reading? I suppose quite possibly, because if he'd never seen a charnel house before, De Brey, but then if he saw these, then why would he do this? We have Indians dancing around a circle of posts. Posts. Someone in the middle. So look at the comparison there. Alright, so here we have the two comparisons. When he's put some weird face on the post here, which there isn't there, and he's put some weird outfit on one of the people here. It's got all kinds of stuff. Oh, okay, they are holding some branches, some whatever that is. That tree must be of some kind of significance. So it says here, watercolour drawing, no caption, Indian dancing around a circle of posts by John White. And engraving their dances, which they thus at their high feasts. Oh, so it looks as if he's saying, oh, this is still they're having a festival. So he's just made an assumption there because John White didn't actually say that. And these are Indians round a fire. This is this one here. I'll have a look at the comparison, but I think we really don't need to look at any more. It's really blatantly obvious that De Brey was just a liar, and even with John White, see if it's what it says underneath here, see if it says Indians round a fire. It's quite interesting how you see the people here just looking really quite natural. But he's added a couple of people walking by over here. Added a bit of scenery at the back. A bit of scenery at the front. This one's got Roman, looks like he's got Roman garbs on. None of these people here have really got very much on at all. And even then, you can even say how true are these images even, because we've already seen that they can really be quite economical with the truth. What you tend to find in a lot of the written accounts is that they're kind of shocked by what they see, and the unattractiveness of the people and the darkness of the people. I can tell you quite clearly that, oh gosh, this one's really black and ugly. So, not saying that that's what they're saying about the people in Virginia, but in general, as they are coming across various copper-coloured nations and tribes. So, we're just wrapping up now after having looked at Theodore De Brey and that quite interesting article from Lorraine Kilroy-Eubank. So we can see that a lot of these images did actually come out of the imagination of the illustrators, because what we're seeing is Theodore De Brey has read the text, read the descriptions, and still has made his own interpretation of what he perceives that the writers and the other artists has seen. And we can clearly see towards the end that there's quite a lot of differences between what John was painting and what John White was painting and what Theodore De Brey was sketching. So what we've done now is we've covered pre-printing press today, because there would have been things like lithographs, blocks, that type of thing. And then yesterday I uploaded the video on Frederick Remington and the illustrators who were around during the so-called Civil War. And again, you can see that imagery played a big part, and here again we can see that imagery has played such a huge part in portraying an imagery which then justifies a behaviour which actually goes against all of the morals that they're teaching, supposedly, within their religion. So stick with me, we're going to be looking at cannibals. I think that's quite an interesting subject. I know I've steered off slightly because I was looking at Jamaica. Believe me, I am still looking at Jamaica. I just can't get over the fact that I've lost this particular document, which was the main source of the information that I was putting out on the immigrants that are here. But I have found some in my search for the information. I'm just coming up with so much more stuff. But I have found some really good information on cannibals, and my premise is that in order for something to enter the psyche, and in order for that type of thinking to enter the psyche, either it's something has happened, or it's a part of the culture, or was a part of the culture at one point. So stick with me, and thank you very much to all my new subs. Look forward to the next video. Take care now. Smithsonian. They say that the picture tells 1,000 words, so you can actually have makings of a story. All these pictures are out of the books mentioned in the article, so don't pay too much attention to their complexions of the characters, because when you look clearly, what you'll notice is that many of the characters actually have fine either hair, or they have clear negroid features. What you could pay attention to are what's going on in the scene. Pay attention to the buildings. I've tried to focus on the buildings so that you could actually see that there were some fantastic buildings here. The sky, you can also see in a lot of them there was some volcanic eruptions going on. And there are clear signs of electricity, some sort of high tech. So keep an eye out for the pictures. I hope you really do enjoy, and stay around for part 3 when we're actually going to be looking at Cannibals. Enjoy.